Welcome to WhiskyCast, Cask Strength Conversation, featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie, and this is episode number 1107 for May 4th, 2025. Coming up in a few minutes.
I wouldn't want to be a new one right now because, you're still trying to get people to pay attention to you when obviously the bigger brands are doing the same at the moment. They can't just sit on their laurels. So I wouldn't want to be, but I think there's an opportunity for the mid-size ones right now in that casks have become available. Prices have come down on new make. They seem to be, if they have the warehousing and this sort of long-term plan, a lot of them seem to really be, have been waiting for this moment.
We're talking about independent bottlers this week with Greg Swartz, the co-director of the new documentary series Independent Spirits. Greg and his team talked to almost every major player in the independent bottling business, and he'll talk with us this week on WhiskyCast In-Depth. I'll also have the What I'm Tasting This Week department, Behind the Label, and much more. The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast.
Hello, Gabriel Cardarella for Jewers. The 2025 release of our Jewers 19-Year-Old Champions Edition is a masterpiece, crafted for those who appreciate the finer things, whether on the course or in a glass. More on that in a moment.
Let's get started with the week's news. It's brought to you by the Dalmore. Lots of negative news to report this week, starting with a failure in the cask investment sector. The Edinburgh-based Whiskey Merchants Trading Limited, which was doing business under the names Cask 88 and Braeburn Whiskey, has gone into administration, leaving the fate of an estimated $80 million worth of whiskey casks uncertain. Forbes' Philippe Schreiberg reports the company is trying to ensure that all cask owners have the proper paperwork for their casks, but it's not clear whether investors will get any return on their investment. More layoffs are coming, this time at Moet Hennessy. The Financial Times reports the wine and spirits division of LVMH will cut around 1,200 jobs and reduce its headcount to pre-pandemic levels. The cuts are largely expected to come via attrition and come as the company recorded a fifth straight quarter of declining sales. Layoffs are also coming at the Isle of Harris distillery, which makes the Heroc single malts. Managing Director Simon Erlanger told the Herald Scotland that challenging headwinds facing the distillery and the industry at large led to the incredibly difficult decision. The distillery is offering staff voluntary redundancies right now, with layoffs expected to follow if the company's cost-cutting target is not reached. The distillery has 45 employees. Meanwhile, some good news from Ireland's Blackwater distillery, where a rescue plan has been approved to stabilize the distillery's finances. Nearly 95% of Blackwater's unsecured debt has been written off as part of the rescue plan. Blackwater went through Ireland's Small Company Administrative Rescue process, which is a method for salvaging small companies with a viable business model. And some good news from Buffalo Trace, which has resumed bottling operations at the distillery following last month's massive flooding. Tours are still not being offered right now, but the distillery's bottle shop is open with advance reservations required. From the secondary market now, Noble & Company has released its latest market intelligence report on the secondary market, and the findings are not good. The auction market experienced an ongoing substantial decline during the fourth quarter of last year, with total transaction volume down by 21% and the value of bottles being sold down 53% over a year ago. The biggest declines came in the luxury market, where collector appetite appears to be cooling off. Bottles priced above £10,000 represented 32.5% of value last year, but fell to just 6.8% this year. Investor demand has shifted to bottles priced at under £1,000. A big announcement from this year's Spirit of Speyside Festival. The Speyside Distillery will be moving to a new location at Strathmashie by Lagan, and the current distillery will be retired. CEO John Harvey McDonough says the current distillery will become a, quote, lost distillery under current Scotch Whisky Association rules. Its whiskies will continue to be sold under the Spey brand name. And a merger will see Scotland's Inchdarney distillery join forces with Macduff International. Inchdarney has been producing whiskey for Macduff's Isla Mist and Louders blends, in addition to its own Rylaw rye whiskey and the upcoming Kinglassy single malt release. The company will be known as Inchdarney Whiskey Limited, with Scott Snedden and Graham Glenn as co-managing directors. In other news, spending cuts in Washington have not affected the export promotion funding the Distilled Spirits Council receives from the Agriculture Department. Discus has been awarded just over $1 million to promote American spirits in key international markets through the USDA's Market Access Program. The money will be used to support trade events in London, Japan, Germany, France, India, and Australia. Discus also received another $1.25 million to use over the next 5 years for regional programs in South America, India, and Singapore. The Grant family's House of Hazelwood brand is releasing a special whiskey over the next 40 years. It comes from casks of Girvan single grain filled in 1964, and the first tranche is being released at 60 years of age. Only 25 decanters are being released now. The rest of the whiskey will be bottled at 70, 80, 90, and 100 years old in 2065. There's no word on pricing. Other new whiskeys of note this week. Little Mill is releasing a similar project to the House of Hazelwood, but it'll be done over 4 years instead of 40. The Echoes of the Past release number 1 is a 34-year-old single malt right now, matured in an Oloroso sherry cask. Only 50 bottles will be drawn off each year from that cask as the whiskey matures over the next 3 years. It's a travel retail exclusive priced at £3,900 a bottle. Frey Ranch is celebrating its 10th anniversary with a new series of whiskeys. First Harvest kicks off the new Harvester series and was created in partnership with master blending consultant Nancy Fraley. It uses all 5 of the grains grown at Frey Ranch in Nevada, including dent corn, winter wheat, winter rye, barley, and oats. Only 500 bottles are available through the Frey Ranch Tasting Room and select Nevada retailers at $250 a bottle. Crown Royal is rolling out a new marquee edition that's finished in rum casks. It's a limited availability release that will be available in Georgia, Maryland, Washington, D.C., and select military exchange stores for $40 a bottle. Chicken Cock is out with a new 10-year-old version of its Double Oak Kentucky whiskey. Like the original 8-year-old version, this one started out in used bourbon barrels, which is why it's called a Kentucky whiskey. It was finished in new charred oak barrels and is priced at $80 a bottle. Ireland's Teeling Whiskey Company has unveiled a new distillery-exclusive bottling, matured in Shiraz red wine casks. It's bottled at 46% ABV with no chill filtration and sells at the distillery for €60 a bottle. Meanwhile, the Whiskey Exchange has the oldest-ever Jameson with an age statement. It's a 23-year-old blend of pot still and grain Irish whiskies that comes from just 4 casks and is available for £325 a bottle. The Whiskey Exchange also has 3 new exclusive bottlings from Signatory, including a 16-year-old Linkwood, a 17-year-old Clynelish, and a 21-year-old Mortlock, all matured in ex-bourbon barrels. Prices range from £89.95 to £245 for the Mortlock. Kentucky's M.B. Rowland Distillery is out with its second Bottled and Bond whiskey. Old 2nd District Bottled and Bond gets its name from the old tax district the distillery resides in today in Pembroke, Kentucky. It's available at the M.B. Rowland gift shop and will soon be available online. No word on pricing. Norway's Aurora Spirit Distillery is releasing its latest Arctic single malt whiskey. Bifrost Yggdrasil is matured in Oloroso seasoned and in-house charred casks and diluted to bottling strength with glacier meltwater. There's no word on pricing. And finally, going off last week's interview with Johnny Walker master blender Emma Walker, there's a new partnership between Emma and renowned French designer Olivier Rousteing in the Johnny Walker Vault's Couture Expression series. There are 4 blends in the series, 1 for each season, and each one pulls different whiskeys from the vault. The whiskeys come in bespoke baccarat decanters designed by Rousting and will sell for £20,000 each. You can keep up with the latest whiskey news all week long at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app. The news is brought to you by the Dalmore.
Hello, Richard Patterson here, Master Distiller, Master Blender for the Dalmore. You know, whenever the team and I are in the world sharing our exceptional single malt, we like to keep in touch with Mark Gillespie and the latest news from WhiskyCast.
Let's check the calendar and see what's happening around the world of whiskey. Whiskey Live Dublin is coming up on May 16th and 17th. The Toulouse Whiskey Festival is May 17th and 18th in Toulouse, France. The Campbellton Malts Festival runs from May 19th through the 24th in Campbellton, Scotland. The Whiskey Exchange has a world whiskey tasting at its London Bridge store on the 22nd. And Fégil, the Isle Festival of Malt and Music, gets underway on the 23rd and runs through May 31st. The Whiskey Exchange welcomes the Whiskey Sponge, Angus MacRailed, for a decadent drinks masterclass on the 28th at its Great Portland Street shop, and has an Isle of Whiskies tasting on the 29th at its London Bridge location. If you're organizing a whiskey event, let us know about it. We'll add it to the calendars at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app.
Dewar's 19-Year-Old Champions Edition is more than just exceptional whiskey. It's a tribute to the U.S. Open Championship. Each year's limited edition release is crafted to honor the host course, integrating its spirit through a unique cask finish. For the 2025 tournament at Oakmont in Pennsylvania, Dewar's continues this tradition with an exceptional 19-year-old whiskey, double-aged, then finished in a way that nods to Pennsylvania's long-standing connection to apple brandy. Created by six-time Master Blender of the Year Stephanie McLeod, this year's edition is finished in Calvados apple brandy casks, imparting layers of green apples, apricots, citrus, warm spice, and a touch of honey. This isn't just a tribute, it's a masterclass in blending. Seek it out, savor every drop, and trust me, you'll be glad you did. Please enjoy responsibly. Copyright 2025, Dewar's is a trademark. Imported by John Dewar & Sons Company, Coral Gables, Florida. Blended Scotch whiskey, 43% alcohol by volume.
This week on WhiskyCast In-Depth, we're looking at independent bottlers, those brave souls that bottle whiskeys made by others under their own brand names. Greg Swartz has been talking with many of them for his new documentary series, Independent Spirits, now available to stream on the web. He's also the director of The Water of Life, a documentary on the Scotch whiskey industry, and has an Irish whiskey project on the books. We talked this week on a Zoom call. What were you trying to accomplish with Independent Spirits?
Well, it's funny because I was intrigued by the question that it's never easy to answer what an independent bottler is if someone is completely new to whiskey or from outside the whiskey industry. It's always we were always looking for a comparison, like what would this compare well to? And so I think it kind of grew out of the idea that was sort of fun and curious. And on a more pragmatic level, I think it was born out of leftover footage from the first film, if I'm honest.
What kind of leftover footage did you have?
Well, we spent a full week filming at Gordon and MacPhail with the first film. And then we maybe used 4 minutes of it. And we were joking about some of this stuff was really good. The editor and I were joking about it. We were like, well, there's some really good stuff here. And it's a real shame. It's just, because PBS made us get the runtime below 90 minutes, so we couldn't add it in. So we just thought, well, this could be a thing. And then so bit by bit, we started doing more interviews and building this kind of huge compendium of, terabyte upon terabyte of interviews from across the independent bottling world.
And you talked to pretty much everybody, as near as I can tell.
There's a few that are missing. And it was always, I don't mean it in a negative way, but there's a few who just chose not to participate. Signatory is not in the film.
Signatory doesn't talk to anybody.
Fair enough. Yeah.
I can't recall the last time I had an interview with Signatory.
Same here. Yeah. So, well, and you interview a lot more people than I do, obviously, but the signatory is not in the film, and then there's a few that are in the film, but not as much as we would have liked. Like Compass Box is not as present. We repeatedly were trying to set up interviews there that didn't work, but they're there.
Although Compass Box really isn't an independent bottler as much as they are a blender.
Yeah, right. Well, then, and that was kind of, we were trying to push the edges a little bit of what was an independent bottler, because, the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society is an independent bottler, but they don't like to call themselves that. So, but my response to that is always, if you're not one, that's only because you've transcended the model, not because you weren't part of that model. So they seem to have kind of accepted that, at least they've tolerated me.
What did you learn doing this film?
Well, the part I didn't know was the history, I think, in a lot of cases. And some of it was obvious history and some of it was not. And the obvious history, I mean, like, Johnny Walker and Dewar's, in by today's standards would be more in line with an independent bottler than with a distillery. That they were in their grocers, they were blending other people's distillate, and that distillate came from all over. So it sort of grew out of that, and I guess I intellectually knew that, but I never kind of put it together until doing the research, how much those brands have in common with that kind of history. But the other thing was just how much trading goes on. There's a sort of a collegial swapping of casks and new make, and you need this and we need this and we don't have this and we're not supplied this anymore, and how are we going to ever get our Kalila again? And that sort of that side of it, the kind of inside baseball, if you will.
It seems interesting that the collegiality, as you mentioned, because we don't see that in a lot of other industries.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember making the first film that someone, and it might have been Jim McEwen, but I honestly don't remember. Someone said to me that the distillers get along across all the distilleries. Any of the bickering you're ever going to see, or infighting, or aggressiveness, is going to come from the marketing people, the people who are literally on the ground fighting for shelf space, kind of thing. But that the distillers are more like the independent bottlers, that there's that sort of familiarity.
Is the independent bottling movement healthy today, given the current economic climate?
I think I wouldn't want to be a new one right now, because you're still trying to get people to pay attention to you, when obviously the bigger brands are doing the same at the moment. They can't just sit on their laurels. So I wouldn't want to be, but I think there's an opportunity for the mid-sized ones right now, in that casks have become available. Prices have come down on new make. They seem to be, if they have the warehousing and the sort of long-term plan, a lot of them seem to really be, have been waiting for this moment, I think, in a way. I mean, no one said that overtly, but you know what I'm saying? Like, not that they're wishing ill on the rest of the industry, but they could finally get casks again. The people are responding to their calls.
You mentioned in the film the decision by Gordon and MacPhail to stop filling new make into their own casks. And that really was a watershed for the independent bottling movement when Gordon and MacPhail did that, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And on a selfish level, it was a watershed moment for us, because we wound up having to restructure the film, because we were like, we can't miss this. This happened while we were editing. So we said, okay, now that's the climax. That's the a hugely pivotal moment, not just for them, but for the entire industry. And so we kind of wound up doing some restructuring. I don't want to give away any, in the 4 episodes, that plays a key role.
Why'd you split it into 4 episodes instead of one long film?
Well, because the film, one of the things we had happen a lot with the first film, which was 88 minutes, was some networks were turning us down because they would only do documentaries in 1 or 2 hour chunks. They wanted clean hours, because if they did a 90-minute, it would throw off their programming schedule. With this film, it quickly became apparent that it was a 2 hour film. There was 2 hours of stuff there. And one of the options we had was it was either cut out more stuff, just get it down to 88 minutes again, cut it into 2 1-hour episodes, or cut it into 4 30 minutes. And then I will say I had forgotten this until last night. I was looking through some of my old files last night, and I had written down 6 half-hour episodes. And I don't ever even remember thinking that was necessary, but apparently I did write it down. It could have even been a typo, but we felt like there were 4 really kind of different eras that we wanted to tell. So it just was a good natural breaking point. And then, a lot of streamers and stuff these days, documentary series are very, very popular right now. People like that sort of more bite-sized chunk.
You can binge watch it and not have to commit to a 2-hour time frame.
Yeah, yeah. And we kind of made them so that they will stand alone. I mean, let's face it, there's no murder mystery at the center of it. So it's not like there's no big reveal. So we made them a little bit standalone so people could even watch them out of order if they needed to or wanted to.
So who are some of the people who appear in this one without giving away? Well, there's no spoiler alerts here. We know who's pretty much the key players are.
Yeah. So, okay. Gordon MacPhail, Cadenheads, Adelphi, Elixir, some of the smaller, Douglas Lang, Scotch Malt Whisky Society, Single Cask Nation, and then there's some really small, newer ones that we wanted to feature just to give some scope, like Dramore Group, Lady of the Glen, Turntable, Glashu,
Lost Lantern,
Pablo Goldbarg, the Catador Itinerante, the Spanish language independent bottler. So I'm sure I'm forgetting loads. I mean, we did 43 interviews. Well, I mean, 43 with just bottlers, 43 brands. And some of them we did multiple ones on, we have multiple interviews about the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. We have multiple interviews about Gordon and MacPhail. So some of those kind of are overlaps. Berry Brothers and Rudd is mentioned briefly. Compass Box is mentioned briefly.
Is the independent bottling movement healthy today?
I mean, I think so. I think it's changing, but I think they'll probably get some the trees will shake loose. Some of the, like I said earlier, I wouldn't want to be a startup right now. But I think, some of the bigger companies either are building distilleries and they're probably in it for the long term either way. They're not going to worry about the current headwinds that the industry seems to be facing, but as long as they can keep the lights on in the meantime. But I think, some of the guys like Watt Whiskey. Mark Watt is interviewed throughout the film. Just because he's a great interview as well as a bottler and an industry veteran. And his attitude is that he's very, very happy that his company is largely him and his wife, because that makes them incredibly nimble and flexible to the market winds.
And they don't have a lot of people depending on them either.
Right. And as long as they kind of keep their ambition, scale, they're okay. I think because they only release a certain number of whiskeys a year. Not many. 8 a year, I think.
I think that's about right. So what's the best whiskey you got to try while filming this?
Ooh. Oh, man.
I'm assuming you got to try some.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I wouldn't say it's the best overall whiskey, but it's the best. The last year's Spirit of Speyside Tormore release that Elixir did as the festival bottle might be the best 8-year-old whiskey I've ever tasted in my life. I managed to source a second and then now a third bottle. Well, I managed to source a second bottle, and then I was gifted a third bottle at our festival last month. But I also had some Finn Thompson whiskey from the 80s. I had a 1969 Glenrothes from Claxton's that was just incredible. It's sometimes some of those really, really old whiskeys, I think, get a bit leathery, is the term I always use for it, but and none of those were. I'm drawing a blank on the vintage on that Finn Thompson. I want to say it was 83, and it was, it's interesting. This is a little bit in the film, but the way he's built his independent bottling line is his grandfather owned the big blend, the Ben Eagles blend, and he inherited all the component casks. So now he's releasing them as single casks, where it's sort of his grandfather's blend deconstructed. But now, because he sat on those for 40 years, those whiskeys are all very old.
What was the best experience you had filming this?
Well, some of the stuff that we did was impromptu, and that was amazing. We took the first film to the Extravaganza Whiskey Festival in Panama City last year, and that's where I met Pablo Goldbard from Itinerante. And I just sort of spontaneously said to him, I talked to him for 10 minutes, and I said, I'd like to talk to you on camera if you'd like. I'm making a film about independent bottling right now. And so we just we were in the hotel ballroom, and as soon as the festival was over, we just went up to the hotel room and set up. And my interview with him was done on my phone. It's just because it was like I didn't have a camera there. I wasn't planning to film there. Luckily, I travel with a microphone that hooks up to my phone all the time. So that was pretty exciting. I mean, I'm in Panama City. I'm interviewing a bottler I just met an hour and a half ago. And he's a very good storyteller. And he came up with a metaphor that's in the opening of the film. That's one of my favorite metaphors for what is an independent bottler. Because, everyone struggles to give good answers, or not good answers, but concise answers to that. And his was, I'm going to ruin it, but it doesn't matter. It's good. He said, it's like being an art gallery owner. I didn't paint the paintings, but if you trust me, you trust the art that I'm going to bring out.
That's a good way of putting it.
And that gave me goosebumps. Like it was that exciting to me that, so that was a great experience. But, some of the other places that, it's funny, we interviewed Alex Bruce twice, and I've still yet to ever get to go to Ardnamurchan. So that's a big missing piece. But Gordon MacPhail was always amazing too. And we also did a lot of shooting at the Artisan in Scotland, in Wishaw.
Oh, nice. I know the pot still also figures in there, or the Bon Accord was in a couple of scenes.
Both. We shot a little bit in the pot still. The pot still doesn't lend itself to, it doesn't have a back area where it's quiet. It's just loud everywhere. So it would have been, but we shot bottle shots there. But the Bon Accord has been amazing to us and let us shoot there. A number of the interviews were shot there. I know Ralphie's interview is next to the plaque that says Bon Accord, but some of the other interviews were actually done in the back.
What's next?
Well, we are about, 5 months away from the premiere of our new film about German beer, about the history of beer culture in Germany. It's going to be very much the same style of film, but about Bavaria, specifically about Upper Franconia. But we're not done with the whiskey stuff yet. We've already begun shooting a smaller series of little films about farmed glass distillers. And I'm in the developmental stages of trying the next. I can tell you right now, I don't know what order they're going to happen in, but the next 3 are going to be Irish whiskey, are going to be American whiskey, and are going to be Indian whiskey. And we've already started shooting a little bit with the American whiskey and the Irish whiskey, just because the opportunities were there. We have not shot Indian whiskey at all yet. And I've kind of, I'll get to Japan eventually, but I have friends who are currently making their own film about Japanese whiskey, and I didn't want to cross paths with them while they're doing it.
That makes good sense. There's room out there for
to
more
me.
Than
it doesn't matter what order they're in.
Yeah, there's room for more than one film about Japanese whiskey, but you don't have to do it immediately.
Yeah, and there's been films about bourbon, but there haven't been films about American whiskey in general. The films that have been made are mostly about bourbon. They're mostly about Kentucky. And I want to create a bit of a wider portrait of that and focus on American single malt as well as rye, go all over the country.
Are you having fun doing this?
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing because I managed to overlap my hobby and my career. So what could be better than that?
Thanks to Greg Swartz for joining us this week on WhiskyCast In-Depth. You'll find a link to watch Independent Spirits in the show notes for this episode at whiskycast.com. By the way, they're releasing a series of independent bottlings from some of the folks featured in the series and have partnered with the online retailer Drinky to make bottles featured in the series available to viewers. Let's take a look at a couple of independent bottlings in the What I'm Tasting This Week department. First up, the Dram More bottling of a Balblair 14-year-old single malt. It's finished in a PX quarter cask and bottled at 53.1% ABV. The nose has touches of chocolate fudge, honey, dried fruits, and a hint of figs. The taste has notes of figs and dates, along with chocolate fudge and soft spices. The finish is long and woody with lingering spice and a hint of fudge, and I'm scoring the Dram More Balblair 14-year-old a 92. The Whiskey Exchange bottled a Linkwood 2013 single cask as part of its Seasons series spring releases. This 10-year-old single malt is bottled at 57.1% ABV, and the nose has touches of lemon zest, dried flowers, pear candies, and honey. The taste has lemon pepper spice, honey, dried flowers, sandalwood, and pear candies, and the finish is long and fruity with a hint of spice. I'm scoring the Whiskey Exchange Linkwood 2013 single malt a 93. I'll be adding these whiskeys to our searchable list of nearly 3,900 different whiskeys from all over the world. Check it out this week at whiskycast.com. Let's open up the inbox now and see what people are talking about this week in our community segment. Chris posted this the other day in the WhiskyCast community app. Hey, WhiskyCast members, my father is celebrating 10 years since his cancer diagnosis. None of us expected him to make it this far, and he is doing quite well for the circumstance. I wanted to get him a nice 10-year whiskey to celebrate. He likes most whiskeys, but specifically Irish and bourbon. If there was a 10-year-old spot, that would be perfect, as he loves green spot, but I don't think that exists. Any recommendations would be appreciated. Thanks. Well, green spot traditionally was 10 years old until about a decade ago when they took the age statement off. And Canuck Sloth responded with this note. Bushmills has a nice 10-year-old, but for something a bit more special, I really like the 12-year-old Bushmills. Whistle Pig has a 10-year bourbon. Congrats to your dad for the extra 10 years. Brian Redden seconded the Bushmills 10-year-old and also suggested the Redbreast 10 distillery version if you can source one. And Juan Cruz suggested the Celtic Whiskey Shop's Dingle Founding Fathers cask. He says this one is 10 years old, and I have tried it. It's fantastic, available, and they ship to the USA. I've tried that one as well, and I second Juan's recommendation. If you have a suggestion we're missing, download the free WhiskyCast community app and share your thoughts with the community. You can also find us on social media. Look for WhiskyCast on Blue Sky, X, Instagram, Facebook, and Threads. Our email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people who make whiskey unique. I have a correction to make this week. Last time around in our community segment, I talked at length about the de minimis exemption on tariffs for low-cost imports coming into the U.S., specifically those shipments valued at $800 or less, and I said they applied to alcohol shipments. Brian Redden corrected me on this with this note. Mark, toward the end of this week's episode, you mentioned that the $800 tariff exemption may apply to shipments of alcohol coming into the U.S., Shipments of alcohol are specifically precluded from that exemption. All shipments of alcohol are subject to tariff, and there is no $800 exemption that might be applicable. Did the research on this as soon as the issue came up a few weeks ago. Assume this is a holdover from prohibition attitudes toward alcoholic spirits rather than any particular policy decision that has been made. Bad policy creates bad outcomes. Brian is right. The $800 de minimis exception does not apply to alcohol shipments, largely because it's technically illegal to import alcoholic beverages into the U.S. via shipping services, unless one has a basic alcohol permit from the TTB. Trust me, I've had more than one sample shipment returned to the shipper because of that requirement. Brian, thanks for catching me on that mistake, and I regret the error. So, How do online retailers like the Whiskey Exchange and the Celtic Whiskey Shop legally ship their products to U.S. consumers? They use what's called a freight forwarder as their U.S. importer. They consolidate packages bound for multiple consumers into one large shipment, then send that to their U.S. agent. After clearing customs and paying the tariffs, the forwarder then breaks down that big package into individual packages and forwards them on to the consumers. If you have something you'd like us to explain on an upcoming episode, just get in touch with us. That's all for this episode of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, the whiskey photo of the week, and, of course, a complete archive of past episodes going all the way back to 2005. Get in touch with us. Download the free WhiskyCast community app from your app store or find us on social media. We're on Blue Sky, X, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast, and our email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
Discover the 2025 limited release of Dewar's 19-Year-Old Champions Edition, finished in Calvados apple brandy casks, a perfect fusion of craftsmanship and tradition. Here's to great whiskey and the game that inspires it.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2025, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.